Mark Grayson's day began like any other, though he had no idea it would end with a note that would change everything. It was a brisk autumn morning in the city, and Mark, dressed sharply in his tailored suit, was reviewing his itinerary for the day. His assistant rattled off a long list of meetings, but Mark's focus was on the evening charity gala, a public relations event meant to showcase his generosity. He didn't particularly enjoy these gatherings, but his advisors insisted they were good for his image. As the day wore on, Mark went through the motions: a meeting with investors, a quick interview with a business magazine, and lunch at an exclusive club with potential clients. By the time evening arrived, he was mentally exhausted but prepared to play the role of the benevolent billionaire. The charity event was being held in the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel downtown, complete with crystal chandeliers and an orchestra playing soft music in the background. The air buzzed with the mingling of donors, socialites, and reporters. Mark arrived fashionably late, as always, greeted by flashes from cameras and the murmured admiration of guests. He plastered on his practiced smile and began circulating the room, shaking hands and exchanging pleasantries. Everything was going as planned until he noticed a small figure standing near the entrance, clutching an envelope. She was a little girl, no older than 8, wearing a faded blue dress that seemed out of place amidst the glitz and glamour of the event. Her blonde hair was tied in 2 neat braids, and she clutched the envelope so tightly her knuckles turned white. Mark couldn't help but notice how nervous she looked, shifting her weight from one foot to the other as if debating whether to approach him. At first, Mark assumed she was lost or the child of one of the guests, but when their eyes met, she began walking toward him with hesitant steps. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued but also slightly annoyed. Children were a rarity at these events, and their presence usually meant some kind of publicity stunt. "Mr. Grayson," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the chatter of the room. Mark leaned down slightly to hear her better. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" She extended the envelope toward him, her hands trembling. "My mom told me to give this to you, and she said you should read it alone." Mark hesitated, his curiosity piqued. The little girl's earnest expression made it impossible to dismiss her. He took the envelope from her, noting the weight of the paper and the faint smell of lavender. "Who's your mom?" he asked, but the girl simply shook her head. "She said you'd understand," the girl whispered. Before Mark could press her further, she turned and darted away, weaving through the crowd and disappearing out the door. For a moment, Mark stood frozen, staring at the envelope in his hand. It was unmarked, with no name or return address. He glanced around, wondering if this was some kind of prank, but the girl's sincerity lingered in his mind. Excusing himself from the event, Mark slipped into a quiet corner of the hotel lobby. He sat down on a plush armchair, the envelope resting on his lap. The orchestra's music faded into the background as he carefully opened it, his fingers slightly unsteady. Inside was a single handwritten letter, the neat cursive suggesting it had been written with care. The first line hit him like a thunderbolt. "Dear Mr. Grayson, you probably don't remember me, but years ago, you made a promise." Mark frowned, his mind racing. A promise? To whom? He continued reading, the words pulling him deeper into a story he couldn't quite piece together. "I don't expect you to remember. After all, people like you meet so many others every day. But for me, that moment changed my life. You said you'd help when you became successful. I waited, hoping you'd find your way back. But now, I don't have the luxury of waiting any longer." Mark felt a knot form in his stomach. The words were both accusatory and pleading, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there was truth behind them. The letter went on. "I don't write this to guilt you. I write because I have no other choice. My daughter and I are at a crossroads, and I need your help. Enclosed, you'll find something to jog your memory." Mark unfolded the small photograph tucked inside the letter. It was an old picture, slightly faded, of a young woman holding an infant. She was smiling, but there was a tiredness in her eyes, as if she'd been through more than her share of hardship. He stared at the photo, his heart pounding. The woman looked familiar, though he couldn't immediately place her. He flipped the photo over and saw a name scrawled on the back, Clara and Lucy. Clara. The name sent a jolt through him. Memories long buried began to surface, hazy but persistent. Clara had been a waitress at a small diner he used to frequent during his college days, back when he was struggling to make ends meet. She had been kind to him, often slipping him extra food even when he couldn't pay. She had encouraged him to keep going when he was ready to give up, telling him he had the potential to do great things. But that had been over 2 decades ago. Could this really be the same Clara? And if so, why had she waited so long to reach out? Mark's mind raced with questions. He folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope, his appetite for the evening's festivities completely gone. He needed answers, and he needed them now. Back inside the ballroom, Mark motioned for his assistant, Jacob, to join him. "Find out everything you can about a woman named Clara," he said, handing Jacob the photograph. "She might have a daughter named Lucy. I want to know where she is, what she's doing, and why she sent me this letter." Jacob looked puzzled but nodded. "I'll get on it right away, sir." As the night went on, Mark couldn't focus on anything else. He replayed the girl's words in his mind, "My mom said you should read this alone." What kind of desperation had driven Clara to send her daughter to deliver such a message? By the time Mark left the event, he felt an unease he hadn't experienced in years. For a man who prided himself on control and certainty, the letter had thrown his carefully constructed world into chaos. As his car navigated the city streets, Mark stared out the window, lost in thought. He couldn't shake the image of the little girl's anxious face or the weight of the words in the letter. Somewhere out there, Clara and Lucy were waiting, depending on him. And for the first time in a long time, Mark Grayson wasn't sure if he could live up to the expectations placed on him. Mark Grayson couldn't sleep that night. The letter sat on his nightstand, its contents replaying in his mind like a broken record. He had read it at least a dozen times, scrutinizing every word, but no new answers emerged. Who was Clara now? Why would she think he owed her something after all these years? And what kind of promise had he made that still held so much weight in her eyes? By morning, his assistant Jacob had gathered a preliminary report. Clara Edwards, aged 41, lived in a modest apartment complex in the struggling west side of the city. She worked as a waitress at a small diner and had a daughter, Lucy, aged 8. Mark skimmed through the report, noting the stark contrast between Clara's current circumstances and the life he himself now led. "She's been working double shifts at the diner," Jacob added as Mark finished reading. "Looks like she's barely scraping by." Mark leaned back in his chair, staring at the photo of Clara and Lucy on his desk. "Did you find out anything about her connection to me?" he asked, though he already had a sinking suspicion he knew the answer. Jacob hesitated. "There's not much on record, but she seems to have stayed in the same area where you went to college. If she knew you back then." Mark cut him off with a wave of his hand. He didn't need Jacob to spell it out. His memories of those days were hazy, a blur of long nights, odd jobs, and mounting debt. But Clara, her kindness stood out like a beacon. She had been a lifeline when he was on the brink of giving up. Without another word, Mark grabbed his coat and told Jacob to clear his schedule. He was going to the diner. The drive to Clara's neighborhood felt like stepping back in time. The streets were lined with worn-down buildings, graffiti-covered walls, and businesses struggling to stay open. It was a stark reminder of the life he had left behind, a world he had worked tirelessly to escape. But seeing it again filled him with an unexpected sense of guilt. When he arrived at the diner, the bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside. The place was small and unassuming, with cracked vinyl booths and a faint smell of grease lingering in the air. A handful of customers sat scattered around, sipping coffee or picking at plates of eggs and toast. Mark spotted Clara almost immediately. She was behind the counter, her back turned to him as she prepared an order. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun, and though her posture was tired, there was a quiet determination in the way she moved. For a moment, Mark hesitated. What was he even going to say to her? How did one begin a conversation after 2 decades of silence? But then she turned around, and their eyes met. Clara froze, the tray in her hands trembling slightly. For a second, she looked as if she might drop it, but then she straightened her shoulders and set it down on the counter. "Mark," she said, her voice a mix of surprise and something else, something guarded. "I didn't expect to see you here." Mark offered a faint smile, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. "I got your letter," he said simply. Clara nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "I figured you might." She gestured to an empty booth near the window. "Why don't we sit down?" They settled into the booth, the awkward silence stretching between them like a chasm. Mark searched for the right words, but Clara spoke first. "I wasn't sure you'd even remember me," she said, her tone even but tinged with weariness. "I do," Mark replied. "I remember everything. You helped me when I had nothing. You believed in me when no one else did. He trailed off, struggling to find the words. "I'm sorry it took me this long to come back." Clara studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "I didn't write to you to make you feel guilty," she said. "I wrote because I didn't know what else to do." Her voice cracked slightly, and she looked away, composing herself. Mark felt a pang of guilt. He wasn't used to seeing people this vulnerable, especially not someone who had once been so strong in his eyes. "What's going on, Clara?" he asked gently. She took a deep breath, her hands resting on the table. "It's Lucy," she said. "She's the reason I reached out." Mark's brow furrowed. "Is she okay?" Clara hesitated before nodding. "She's okay for now, but things have been hard, Mark. Really hard. I've been doing everything I can to keep us afloat, but I'm running out of options. The rent's overdue, and the diner isn't enough to cover everything. Lucy's school needs supplies, and she's been asking about things I can't give her, things I wish I could." Her voice grew quieter. "I thought if anyone could help, it might be you. Not just because of the money. But because you promised." Mark felt his chest tighten. The weight of her words, and the reminder of his own promise, hit him like a tidal wave. "I didn't forget what you did for me," he said after a moment. "I just got so caught up in everything. I'm sorry, Clara. I should have reached out sooner." Clara shook her head. "It's not about the past, Mark. It's about Lucy. She deserves a better future than this." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. Mark looked out the window, watching as a group of kids played on the sidewalk, their laughter echoing through the neighborhood. He thought about his own childhood, the struggles he had faced, and how Clara's kindness had given him a second chance. He turned back to her, his jaw set with determination. "I'll help you," he said firmly. "Whatever you need, I'll make it happen." Clara looked at him skeptically. "It's not just about writing a check, Mark. This neighborhood, this community, it's falling apart. People are losing hope. Lucy sees it every day, and I can't shield her from it." Mark nodded slowly. "Then we'll fix it," he said. "Not just for Lucy, but for everyone. I owe you that much." For the first time, Clara's expression softened. "I didn't expect you to say that," she admitted. Mark leaned forward, his voice steady. "You helped me when no one else would. Now it's my turn to do the same." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the diner door opening. Lucy walked in, her face lighting up when she saw her mother. But when her eyes landed on Mark, she hesitated, her expression cautious. Clara smiled at her daughter and gestured for her to come over. "Lucy, this is Mr. Grayson," she said. "Remember the letter you gave him?" Lucy nodded, her gaze darting between the two adults. "Did he read it?" Mark smiled, his voice gentle. "I did. And I'm here because of you. You're very brave, Lucy." Lucy blushed, hiding her face behind her mother's arm. "I just wanted to help Mom," she said softly. Mark's heart ached at her innocence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph from the letter, placing it on the table. "This reminded me of a promise I made a long time ago," he said. "And I'm going to keep it." Lucy's eyes widened, and for the first time, a small smile appeared on her face. Clara reached across the table, her hand brushing Mark's. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded, but his mind was already racing with plans. He didn't just want to help Clara and Lucy, he wanted to transform their lives and the lives of everyone in the community. For the first time in years, Mark felt a sense of purpose beyond profits and board meetings. This wasn't about charity or publicity. It was about making things right. The following week, Mark Grayson found himself staring at his penthouse office window, deep in thought. The skyline of the bustling city felt distant and unimportant compared to what he had witnessed in Clara's neighborhood. The conversations with her and Lucy still played in his mind, sparking emotions he hadn't felt in years: compassion, responsibility, and a yearning to give back. He wasn't just going to send a check and move on. He wanted to make a tangible difference. Mark's assistant, Jacob, entered the office quietly, holding a tablet with a report. "I've compiled some options for charitable contributions to the West Side," Jacob began, but Mark raised his hand to stop him. "Jacob," Mark said, turning away from the window, "I don't want to just write a check or donate to existing charities. That's not enough. Clara and Lucy deserve better, and so does the entire community. I want to create something lasting, something meaningful." Jacob hesitated, sensing the seriousness in Mark's tone. "What are you thinking, sir?" Mark leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "I want to start a revitalization project," he said. "Affordable housing, improved schools, job training programs, community centers, everything they need to thrive, not just survive. And I want Clara to be a part of it." Jacob raised an eyebrow. "Do you think she'll agree? She doesn't seem like someone who wants charity." Mark smiled faintly. "It's not charity. It's an opportunity. Clara is the heart of that community. She understands their struggles in a way I never could. If anyone can guide this project from the inside, it's her." Jacob nodded, already typing notes on his tablet. "Understood. I'll start drafting a proposal and reaching out to urban development experts. Should I also arrange a meeting with Clara to discuss her role?" "Yes," Mark replied firmly. "But first, I want to see the neighborhood for myself. I need to understand their challenges beyond what's on paper." The next day, Mark traded his tailored suit for casual clothes and drove himself to the West Side. He didn't want to attract attention, so he parked his luxury car a few blocks away and walked through the streets. The deeper he ventured, the more the disparity became evident: cracked sidewalks, abandoned buildings, and kids playing in unsafe areas. It was a stark reminder of how easily he had left this life behind, while so many others remained trapped in it. As Mark approached the diner, he noticed Clara standing outside, talking to a man who looked frustrated. She was gesturing emphatically, trying to calm him down. Curious, Mark stayed back, observing the exchange. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jensen," Clara was saying. "I'll have the rent by the end of the month. I just need a little more time." The man, who appeared to be her landlord, crossed his arms. "Clara, I've been patient, but I have bills to pay too. If you can't make rent by the end of the week, I'll have no choice but to evict you." Clara's face fell, and she nodded reluctantly. I understand. Thank you for giving me a little more time. As the landlord walked away, Mark approached her. Everything okay? He asked gently. Clara jumped slightly, surprised to see him. Mark? What are you doing here? I wanted to see the neighborhood for myself, he said. And it looks like I came just in time. Clara sighed, rubbing her temples. It's nothing I can't handle. Mr. Jensen's been lenient, but I'm behind on rent. I'll figure it out. Mark frowned. Why didn't you tell me? I could have helped. I didn't reach out to you for that kind of help, Clara said firmly. I wanted you to remember your promise, not feel obligated to fix everything for me. Mark admired her pride and determination, but he couldn't ignore the urgency of the situation. What if I could help you without making you feel like it's charity? He asked. Clara raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Come work with me, Mark said. Not for my company, but for your community. I'm starting a revitalization project for the West Side, and I need someone who understands the people here, someone who can make sure the changes we implement actually benefit them. You'd be the perfect person for the job. Clara looked at him skeptically. You're serious? You want me to work on a project that big? Mark nodded. You've been holding this community together on your own for years. Imagine what you could do with real resources and support. Clara hesitated, clearly overwhelmed by the offer. I don't know, Mark. I've never done anything like that before. You don't have to know everything, Mark assured her. I'll make sure you have a team to guide you. All I need is your passion and insight. Clara glanced at the diner, where Lucy was helping clear tables. What about Lucy? She asked softly. I can't take on something like this if it means spending less time with her. Mark smiled. She can be part of this too. I'll make sure your schedule works for you and your family. After a long moment, Clara nodded. Okay, she said. I'll do it. Mark felt a surge of relief. You won't regret this, Clara. Together, we're going to change lives. Over the next few weeks, the project began to take shape. Mark hired urban planners, architects, and social workers to assess the neighborhood's needs. Clara became the face of the initiative, meeting with residents to gather their input and ensure their voices were heard. At first, there was skepticism. Many in the community doubted that a billionaire CEO would care about their struggles or follow through on his promises. But as they saw Clara at the forefront, their doubts began to fade. One day, as Mark and Clara walked through the neighborhood to review potential sites for the first community center, they were approached by a group of kids. Among them was a boy named Tyler, who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Are you really going to build a park here? Tyler asked, his wide eyes filled with hope. Mark crouched down to his level. That's the plan, he said. What kind of park would you like? Tyler grinned. A big one. With swings and a slide. And maybe a basketball court. Mark chuckled. I think we can make that happen. As the kids ran off, Clara turned to Mark, her expression thoughtful. You're really doing this, aren't you? She said. Mark smiled. We're doing this, he corrected. But not everyone was on board. Behind the scenes, Mark faced resistance from some of his business partners, who saw the project as a waste of resources. One executive even suggested using the opportunity to gentrify the area and turn a profit, which infuriated Mark. This isn't about making money, Mark told them during a heated board meeting. It's about making a difference. If you can't support that, then maybe you shouldn't be part of this company. The project moved forward, but not without challenges. Securing permits, dealing with bureaucratic red tape, and addressing community concerns required patience and persistence. But Mark and Clara pushed through, driven by their shared vision. One evening, as they stood on the rooftop of a newly renovated building that would soon house affordable apartments, Clara turned to Mark. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" he asked. "For believing in me," she replied. "And for keeping your promise." Mark looked out at the neighborhood, now buzzing with hope and possibility. "This is just the beginning," he said. "There's still so much more to do." As the sun set over the west side, Mark realized that his life had taken on a new purpose. This wasn't just about fulfilling a promise, it was about creating a legacy that truly mattered. The community center ribbon-cutting ceremony was scheduled for a brisk Saturday morning. Mark stood at the front of the newly constructed building, watching as volunteers and workers put the finishing touches on the decorations. Bright banners hung from the roof, balloons swayed in the chilly wind, and a long table with refreshments lined the sidewalk. Kids ran around excitedly, marveling at the new playground that had been built nearby. Clara stood beside Mark, holding Lucy's hand, a mixture of pride and nervousness on her face. "This is it," Mark said, looking over at her. "Our first milestone." Clara exhaled, her breath visible in the cool air. "I still can't believe this is real," she said. 6 months ago, I couldn't pay rent, and now we're opening a center that's going to change lives." Mark smiled. "It's real, Clara. And it's just the beginning." People from the neighborhood began to gather, their faces a mix of curiosity and excitement. For many of them, the West Side hadn't seen this kind of investment or attention in decades. The transformation of the dilapidated old warehouse into a vibrant community hub was nothing short of miraculous. As the crowd grew, Mark took the microphone, stepping onto a small stage set up in front of the center. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice carrying over the hum of chatter. "When I first visited this neighborhood, I saw more than just struggling buildings and broken sidewalks. I saw a community filled with resilience, strength, and potential. This center is just the first step in our journey to make the West Side a place where everyone can thrive." The crowd applauded, and Mark handed the microphone to Clara. She hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, her hands trembling slightly. "I never thought I'd be standing here, speaking to all of you," she said, her voice steadying as she continued. "This center isn't just about the building, it's about us. It's about what we can achieve when we come together. I want to thank Mark for believing in us and for giving me the chance to be a part of this. And I want to thank all of you for trusting me to represent our community. This is our home, and we're going to make it better, together." The applause was thunderous, and as Clara cut the ribbon, cheers erupted from the crowd. Children rushed inside to explore the new library and computer lab, while adults gathered in the multipurpose room to discuss upcoming programs and workshops. The energy was infectious, and for the first time in years, the West Side felt alive with hope. Mark stayed at the event for hours, mingling with residents and listening to their stories. He met Maria, a single mother who was eager to enroll in the job training program, and James, a retired teacher who volunteered to run after-school tutoring sessions. Everywhere he turned, he saw people taking ownership of the center, making it their own. But as the day wore on, not everyone was celebrating. Mark noticed a group of men standing at the edge of the crowd, their expressions wary. They didn't join in the festivities or approach the center, instead watching from a distance with crossed arms. Mark recognized one of them as Daryl, a local figure known for running illegal activities in the area. "Looks like not everyone's happy about the changes," Mark said quietly to Clara, nodding in their direction. Clara followed his gaze and frowned. "Daryl and his crew. They've been running this neighborhood for years, and they're not thrilled about losing control." Mark's jaw tightened. "We're not going to let them intimidate us. This center is here to stay." Later that evening, as the event wound down, Mark and Clara stayed behind to help clean up. Lucy had fallen asleep on a makeshift bench, wrapped in a borrowed coat, her face peaceful. The sight filled Mark with a sense of purpose. This was why they were doing this, for kids like Lucy to have a better future. As they were packing up the last of the decorations, a loud crash startled them. The front window of the center shattered, and a brick landed on the floor inside. Clara gasped, clutching Lucy protectively, while Mark rushed to the broken glass. Outside, Daryl and his crew stood in the shadows, smirking. "Stay out of our business, Grayson," Daryl called out. "You don't belong here." Mark stepped forward, his voice firm. "This isn't about me, Daryl. It's about this community. And we're not going anywhere." Daryl laughed, shaking his head. "You think you can just waltz in here and fix everything? This place has been ours for years. You're wasting your time." Mark's eyes didn't waver. "Maybe it's time for a change," he said. "And you're welcome to be a part of it, if you're willing to leave the past behind." Daryl's smirk faltered for a moment before he turned and walked away with his crew. Clara approached cautiously, her face pale. "What are we going to do, Mark? If they keep causing trouble, people might be too scared to come here." Mark placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We're going to show them that we're not afraid. And we're going to keep building until there's nothing left for them to tear down." The incident shook the community, but it also galvanized them. Residents came together to repair the damage, refusing to let fear take hold. Clara organized a neighborhood watch group, and Mark hired security for the center, ensuring that it would remain a safe space for everyone. As the weeks passed, the center became a beacon of hope. Attendance at workshops and programs surged, and new partnerships with local businesses provided job opportunities for residents. Slowly but surely, the West Side began to transform. One evening, Clara received an unexpected visitor. Daryl showed up at her door, his expression guarded. "Can we talk?" he asked gruffly. Clara hesitated before stepping aside to let him in. They sat at the kitchen table, the tension thick in the air. "I've been thinking about what Mark said," Daryl began, his voice low. "About leaving the past behind. I don't know if I can, but I want to try." Clara studied him carefully. "What made you change your mind?" Daryl looked down, fiddling with his hands. "My nephew. He started going to the tutoring sessions at the center. He's excited about school for the first time in his life. I don't want to mess that up for him." Clara's expression softened. "If you're serious about this, we'll help you. But you have to meet us halfway, Daryl. No more intimidation, no more illegal activities. This community deserves better." Daryl nodded slowly. "I'll try," he said. "But it's not going to be easy." "Nothing worth doing ever is," Clara replied. As he left, Clara felt a glimmer of hope. People could change, if they were given the chance. Meanwhile, Mark continued to expand the project, securing funding for a second community center and additional housing developments. His vision for the West Side was becoming a reality, and he couldn't have done it without Clara. One evening, as they walked through the neighborhood together, Mark turned to Clara. "You've been amazing, you know that," he said. Clara smiled. "So have you. I couldn't have done this without you." Mark looked around at the bustling streets, the laughter of children echoing in the air. "This is what it's all about," he said. "Giving people a reason to believe in something bigger than themselves." Clara nodded, her heart full. "And we're just getting started." The sun had just begun to set, casting a warm golden hue over the West Side as Mark stood on the balcony of the second community center under construction. From his vantage point, he could see the neighborhood's transformation. The streets that had once been riddled with potholes and lined with crumbling buildings now showcased freshly paved roads, thriving gardens, and vibrant murals painted by local artists. The community had rallied in ways Mark had never anticipated, and the momentum was undeniable. But despite the progress, challenges loomed. While the first center had become a hub of activity and inspiration, whispers of resistance still circulated. Mark knew that change, while empowering to many, had also created discomfort for others who feared losing their grip on the community they'd controlled for so long. Daryl had kept his word and stepped back from his old ways, but his departure had left a power vacuum. A younger, more reckless group had begun to surface, determined to undermine the progress. It was during one of the planning meetings for the new center's grand opening that Clara brought the issue to Mark's attention. She had been meeting with residents regularly, and the growing tension in certain parts of the neighborhood was hard to ignore. "They're calling themselves the Red Line Crew," Clara said, setting down her notepad. "A bunch of kids, mostly teenagers, but they've been causing trouble, tagging walls, stealing supplies, intimidating some of the volunteers." Mark frowned, leaning back in his chair. "Do we know who's leading them?" Clara hesitated. "It's Devin. Daryl's nephew." The name hit Mark like a punch to the gut. Devin, the same boy who had once been excited about the tutoring sessions, the one who'd shown so much promise. He'd even participated in a few of the center's art programs, his talent for drawing earning praise from everyone who saw his work. How had things gone so wrong? "I'll talk to Daryl," Mark said after a moment. "Maybe he can reach Devin before this gets worse." Later that evening, Mark met Daryl at a small diner on the edge of the neighborhood. The older man looked tired, his once imposing presence diminished by the weight of the changes happening around him. "I heard about Devin," Mark said, cutting straight to the point. "He's leading a group that's trying to undo everything we've worked for." Daryl sighed, rubbing his temples. "I've tried talking to him, Mark. He won't listen. Says I've gone soft. He thinks all of this," he gestured vaguely, "is just a show, that it doesn't mean anything." "It means something to a lot of people," Mark countered. "Including you. We can't let him ruin this. For everyone." Daryl leaned back, his eyes distant. "I'll try again, but Devin's stubborn. He's angry. Feels like this place is leaving him behind." Mark nodded, understanding the sentiment. For some, the rapid changes were overwhelming, a stark reminder of what they'd lost or never had. But giving up wasn't an option. The next few weeks were tense. Devin's group escalated their activities, breaking into the first center late one night and spray painting the walls with messages like, "This isn't for us," and "Stay out." The damage was disheartening, but Mark and Clara refused to let it derail their efforts. They organized a cleanup day, and dozens of residents showed up to help, scrubbing away the graffiti and repairing the damage. Amid the turmoil, Mark devised a plan. If Devin and his crew felt excluded, then they needed to be brought into the fold. He proposed a new program specifically aimed at at-risk youth, offering mentorship, skills training, and opportunities to lead community projects. But he knew that getting Devin on board would be the real challenge. One evening, Mark found Devin sketching on the steps of an abandoned building. The teenager didn't look up as Mark approached, his pencil moving rapidly across the paper. "That's good," Mark said, nodding at the drawing. It was a detailed sketch of the Old West Side, with its cracked streets and boarded-up windows, but there was a subtle beauty to it, a hint of hope in the way Devin had shaded the light breaking through the clouds. Devin glanced at Mark, his expression guarded. "What do you want?" "To talk," Mark replied, sitting down a few steps below him. "This place, everything we're doing, it's for you too, Devin. But I can't help you if you don't let me." Devin scoffed. "You think putting up a few new buildings changes anything? People like me, we're still the same. Still stuck." "You're not stuck," Mark said firmly. "You're talented. Smart. You have a future, Devin, but you have to choose it. No one's going to hand it to you." Devin didn't respond, but his grip on the pencil tightened. Mark saw the conflict in his eyes, the anger, the hurt, but also the flicker of something else. Hope, maybe. Or curiosity? I'm starting a new program, Mark continued. I want you to be part of it. You'll get to lead projects. Design murals, show the world what this community is really about. But you have to leave the Redline crew behind. Devon looked at him sharply. Why would you trust me after everything I've done? Because I know who you are, Mark said simply. And I believe in you. For a long moment, Devon said nothing. Then he closed his sketchbook and stood. I'll think about it, he muttered before walking away. It wasn't the commitment Mark had hoped for, but it was a start. And as the days went by, Devon began to show up at the center, always on the fringes, observing but not participating. Slowly, he started to engage, first by offering suggestions for a mural project, then by volunteering to help paint it. His crew began to drift away, some following his lead, others disappearing from the scene entirely. The mural Devon designed became a centerpiece of the second community center. It depicted the neighborhood's journey, its struggles, its resilience, and its transformation. At the center of the mural was a tree, its roots firmly planted in the ground, its branches reaching toward the sky. Beneath it, Devon had scrawled a simple message: growth starts here. When the mural was unveiled at the center's grand opening, the crowd erupted in applause. Devon stood off to the side, his hands shoved in his pockets, but there was a faint smile on his face as he watched the community celebrate. Mark approached him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. You did good, Devon. Thanks, Devon said quietly. For giving me a chance. As the event continued, Mark felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but moments like this made it all worthwhile. The West Side was changing, not just its buildings or its streets, but its people. And with every step forward, the future grew brighter. The community center buzzed with life every day as people of all ages and backgrounds gathered to participate in programs, workshops, and events. The West Side, once a forgotten corner of the city, had become a beacon of resilience and transformation. Yet, even as the community thrived, Mark found himself grappling with the enormity of what still needed to be done. It was late one evening when Mark sat in his small office at the First Center, reviewing proposals for new programs. Clara, ever the voice of reason and encouragement, knocked softly on the door before stepping inside. She carried 2 cups of coffee and a weary but warm smile. You've been at this all day, she said, setting 1 cup on the desk in front of him. Take a break. Mark chuckled, leaning back in his chair. You know me. There's always something more to do. Clara sat across from him, her expression thoughtful. You've done so much already, Mark. The West Side is unrecognizable from where we started. But you can't carry this on your shoulders forever. He looked at her, sensing there was more she wanted to say. What are you getting at? Clara hesitated, then took a deep breath. I think it's time to talk about sustainability. We've built something incredible here, but it needs to outlast us. We need leaders from within the community, people who can carry this vision forward. Mark nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. It wasn't the first time he'd thought about the future, but the idea of stepping back, even slightly, filled him with unease. This project had become his life's work, a mission that had consumed him entirely. Letting go, even just a little, felt impossible. But Clara was right. The West Side didn't just need Mark, it needed leaders who had lived its struggles, who understood its people in ways he never could. It was a humbling realization, but also a necessary one. Over the next few weeks, Mark and Clara began identifying potential leaders within the community. They looked for individuals who had shown resilience, compassion, and a commitment to helping others. Devon was an obvious choice. Since the mural project, he had become a central figure in the center's activities, mentoring younger kids and organizing art workshops. Another standout was Maria, a single mother who had started a neighborhood garden that now provided fresh produce to dozens of families. Her tenacity and ability to rally others made her a natural leader. There was also Jerome, a retired schoolteacher who had taken it upon himself to run a literacy program for adults. His quiet determination and deep well of knowledge inspired everyone he worked with. Mark approached each of them individually, sharing his vision for the future and inviting them to take on more prominent roles. To his relief and gratitude, they all accepted, eager to contribute to the legacy being built. Meanwhile, the community itself continued to grow stronger. Businesses began to return to the West Side, drawn by the renewed sense of hope and possibility. Local entrepreneurs opened cafes, shops, and workshops, creating jobs and opportunities for residents. The streets, once desolate and dangerous, now bustled with activity. But with progress came new challenges. As the West Side gained attention, developers and investors began eyeing the area, eager to capitalize on its revival. The threat of gentrification loomed, sparking heated debates among residents. Mark knew they needed to act quickly to protect the community from being priced out of its own success. He and Clara worked with local leaders to form a coalition that would advocate for policies ensuring affordable housing and community ownership of key properties. They organized town hall meetings, inviting residents to share their concerns and ideas. It was a difficult and often contentious process, but it brought the community closer together, reinforcing their commitment to preserving what they had built. One evening, as Mark walked through the neighborhood, he passed a group of children playing basketball on a newly installed court. Their laughter echoed through the air, a stark contrast to the silence that had once hung over the area. He paused to watch them, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "Hey, Mr. Mark," one of the kids called out, waving enthusiastically. Mark waved back, grinning. "You guys practicing for the big game next week?" "Yeah," the boy replied. "We're gonna win, too." Mark laughed, his heart full. Moments like this reminded him why he had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't just about buildings or programs, it was about people. About giving them the tools and support they needed to thrive. As he continued his walk, Mark found himself at the mural Devin had painted. The tree, with its strong roots and reaching branches, seemed almost alive in the fading light. Beneath it, someone had added a new message: "Together, we rise." The words resonated deeply with Mark. They captured the essence of everything the West Side had become, a community that had faced its struggles head-on and emerged stronger, more united than ever. It was a reminder that progress was never the work of one person alone. It was a collective effort, a shared vision. The following months brought more milestones. The second community center opened its doors, offering a wide range of programs and services. The new leaders stepped into their roles with confidence, bringing fresh ideas and perspectives. Devin launched an art initiative that showcased the talents of local youth, while Maria's garden expanded to include a farmer's market. Jerome's literacy program grew to include digital skills training, empowering residents to navigate an increasingly tech-driven world. Mark gradually took a step back, allowing the new leaders to take the reins. It wasn't easy, letting go never was, but it felt right. He remained involved, offering guidance and support when needed, but he trusted the community to chart its own course. One day, as he sat in a quiet corner of the first center, Mark found himself reflecting on the journey. It had been a long and often arduous road, filled with setbacks and triumphs. But through it all, the West Side had proven its strength, its resilience. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was a shift in mindset, in belief. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the neighborhood, Clara joined him, a knowing smile on her face. "Thinking about the future?" she asked. "Always," Mark replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "But this time, I'm thinking about how bright it looks." Clara nodded, her smile widening. "You've built something incredible, Mark. And the best part? It's just the beginning." Mark turned to her, a sense of peace settling over him. No, he said softly. We built it. Together. As the evening deepened, the sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air, a symphony of hope and possibility. The West Side had found its voice, its strength. And as Mark watched the community he loved continue to grow and thrive, he knew that the legacy they had built would endure, carried forward by the people who called it home.